Today, we're going to get into a tale that every single human, especially women, can relate to. It's about having injured instincts, getting into trouble, and then reconnecting with your gut again. I'm also going to be sharing my real life experience with that myself. And the tale I want to share is from Women Who Run with the Wolves. The tale is called Bluebeard. It's about a predator, a forbidden secret, the heroine's journey of discovery, and then her ultimate escape. And I can relate. I know a lot of people can. And then the timeline I'm going to be sharing after that is going to be my real life examples of kind of getting into an abusive relationship, realizing it's not going to change, and then getting out 5 years later. This podcast is for anyone who is in the process of becoming. I hope that whoever's meant to hear what I have to say is listening. But as always, all the cunts to the front. I will take the time to say trigger warning because I am going to talk about emotional abuse, mental abuse, violence in the home. So just to put that out there, like check in with yourself if you're in the right headspace or emotional space to take that in right now. I'm going to tell you the tale of Bluebeard, then I'm going to tell you my story. And then we're going to get into the lessons that Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes breaks down about Bluebeard. And I'm also going to share how I learned those the hard way in my own life. The thing you have to know about this tale is that it comes from someone who knew someone who witnessed the proof of Bluebeard's demise. There's a lot of different versions of Bluebeard. Like there's French literature, there's German variants like Brothers Grimm, there's English adaptations. But the one I'm going to talk about is from Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, author. And she got it from her aunt, which was a mixture of like French and Slavic versions intertwined. So I'm going to share it like I'm sharing the tea, okay? So this is the tale of Bluebeard, okay? There were coils of a beard kept in a convent of nuns in the mountains. No one knows how it came to rest there. Some say it's because the nuns buried what was left of his body, but no one else would touch it. We don't know why the nuns would keep it, but it's true. My friend who saw it said it was a blue indigo colored. The beard was once worn by a failed magician, a giant man with an eye for women, a man known by the name of Bluebeard. It is said that he courted 3 sisters at the same time, but they were frightened by his beard and hid when they called on him. So he tries to convince them, right, that he's like a good guy. So he invites them and their mother to go for an outing in the forest. So he gets there, he shows up with horses all adorned with like ribbons and bells, and off they went into the forest. So they had the most wonderful day riding. Their dogs were running beside them and even stopping under like a giant tree where Bluebeard regaled them with stories and fed them dainty treats. So the sisters think he's actually not so bad after all, right? So they get home talking kind of like we do, like the day was fun, right? What a good time we had. But the 2 older sisters' suspicions returned, and so did their fears. So they vowed not to see Bluebeard again. Very smart. But the youngest sister, she was like, if he can be charming, like he can't be that bad, right? So the more she talked to herself, alone with her own justifications, the less awful he seemed, and less blue his beard appeared. So when he asks for her hand in marriage, she accepts. She gave the proposal great thought after all and felt ready to marry this elegant man. So they get married and they ride off into the woods to his castle. Time passes and he needs to go away for something. And he's like, do whatever you want. Invite your family. Have a feast. Here's all the keys to my castle, to the money rooms, to the storeroom. But don't use this one only tiny little key. She's like, okay, dearest, go and come back soon to me. And her sisters come to visit and she repeats her instructions from Bluebeard. So they make a game of it immediately, getting curious and finding the door that the little key goes to. So there were over like 100 rooms in every wing of the castle. Okay. So they had great fun and they at last come to this cellar, which has like a corridor and a blank wall, right? So they were kind of thinking that the key wouldn't go to any door at all. Then they heard a sound. And around the corner in the cellar was a small door just closing, but it was firmly locked when they tried to open it. So they say, sister, go get the key. This must be the door, right? It opened and it was pitch black in there. So they're like, sister, fetch a candle. So she goes to fetch the candle. And once the sister returned with the candle, they all screamed at once, for the ground was a marsh of blood, and blackened bones of corpses were flung about, and skulls were stacked like pyramids of apples in all the corners. They slammed the door shut, yanked out the key, and all of them gasping and shouting like, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." And the wife looked down horrified to find the key was stained with blood, so she tried to clean it. It didn't work. The other sister tried to clean it, didn't work. Other sister, same for the third sister, right? So she put it in her pocket and they ran to the kitchen. And when they arrived, the wife's white skirt was stained red, for the key was weeping tear after tear of blood. So nothing made it stop bleeding, right? So they wrapped it in like horsehair. They tried scrubbing it, like the pressing ashes to it didn't work, cobwebs didn't work, searing it in heat didn't work. Nothing was working, okay? So she hid it away in her wardrobe and pretended it was all a bad dream. The husband returned the next morning. Walking into the castle, calling to his wife, he asked, "How was everything?" "Very fine, sir." "How were my storerooms?" "Very fine, sir." "How are my money rooms?" "Very good, very fine." "So everything is good, wife?" "Yes, everything is good." And then he whispered and looked into her eyes. "Well, then you best return my keys." With one glance, he saw what key was missing. "Where's the smallest key?" Stuttering, "I lost it. Yeah, I lost it. I was writing and it fell off the ring." And he's like, "What have you done with it, woman?" And she's like, "I don't remember." And he's like, "Don't lie to me." And he put his hand gently to her face to caress her cheek, but instead seized her hair and called her an infidel. He snarled and he threw her to the floor. "You've been in the room, haven't you?" He threw open her wardrobe and saw that all her gowns were drenched in red blood. "Now it's your turn, my lady," he said. He dragged her down to the cellar. Just a look from Bluebeard's fiery eyes and the door swung open for him. That is so creepy. And there lay all the skeletons of his previous wives. She grabbed the door frame and said, "Please let me compose myself and get ready for death, but a quarter of an hour to make peace with God." And he snarled, but he agreed. And the wife raced up the stairs to her chambers and posted her sisters on the balcony. So she told them to go out to the balcony, right? So she knelt to pray, but instead of praying, she called out to her sisters. "Sisters, sisters, do you see your brother is coming?" "We see nothing but plains," they said. "Sisters, sisters, do you see my brother's coming?" They say, "We see a whirlwind in the distance." And she's like, "Sisters, sisters, do you see the brothers coming?" And they say, "Yes, we see them. Our brothers are here. They just entered the castle." So Bluebeard comes stomping down the hall to his wife's chambers, saying, "I'm coming to get you." As his heavy feet strode toward her, rocks in the hallway shook, sand is falling from the cracks, okay? His hands are outstretched to seize her, but just then, her brothers on horseback galloped down the castle hallway, charged her room to drag Bluebeard out of the castle, and slashed and cut him and whipped him, slaying him down to the ground, killing him at last, and leaving his remains for the buzzards. Whew. So this chapter and part of the book hit me like a ton of bricks when I read it because I read it this year, and it's 4 years after dealing with someone extremely similar to that character, or to that representation of the psyche, I should say. So that person that I dated was very similar, like had a lot of initial charm. I ignored my little gut nudges. They didn't stop me from continuing to date him. I ignored locked doors, you could say. And it took a major toll on my sense of self, my intuition, my instincts. And I just wanted to share about this because, like, I know someone relates. I didn't realize at the time that I was living my own version of this story. But looking back, the parallels are loud. And I want to power up for this story. So I'm going to just give myself a little tea first. I actually designed this tea and I'm really excited about it. Oh, that's good. So this is my personal Bluebeard story, okay? I was like 23, 24, right? I just turned 24, I think. And I was on a growth path, which is the part that kind of fucks me up. But so I was working for a production company. I was doing health coaching on the side, like as a side business, doing a fit club, inviting people, did it with the whole team, right? So I go to Schmoshko and this guy kind of hits on me. So I'm like, whatever. I invite him to a workout. I don't really think too much of it because I invite everybody to workouts. But he starts pursuing me from there and now has my contact information. So he was super charming. I like would do workouts and I don't know if he would ask me if I ate yet or something, and he would show up and just like give me food and be like, "You should eat after blah, blah, blah," and would like call me a strong woman and wanted to support me, and then started taking me places, like new places I've never been to in LA, and new food because I love food and blah, 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 right? But little things should have like tipped me off. Like we took my car quite a few handfuls of times because his car was like in the shop or being worked on something. But knowing what I know now, he was probably just too fucking lazy to do anything about his car. So anyway, it is great, honestly. Initially, we started being intimate, and I'm like coming into my womanhood. So like somebody else knowing what to do in like bed, quote unquote, should have been like a standard kind of bar, but it was definitely part of like wooing me. And I don't remember the timeline exactly. I am going to go through my journals and make a whole episode about that. But it was definitely less than a year, and we moved in with each other because it was just going so great. We moved in with another couple. And mind you, I never saw his place before we did this. I will come back to that. So my parents were voicing concern, and I was simply like, it's fine. If it doesn't work out, I'll leave. It's simple as that. No problem. And I truly, truly believed that. And soon the other couple actually bailed out of the apartment. So it was just us. And then eventually we got a dog. So like he comes to workouts with me, supports me a little, does yoga with me a few times. All these little things came up though, like he quit his job because he knew better than them, got another job. Same thing happened. Year 2, 3. So he would always drive fast and weave like impatiently, kind of talk shit to other cars, like in the car, but not like loudly or anything. But he got way more comfortable with me because I wasn't going anywhere, lowering the window, yelling at people, honking, throwing shit out of the window at cars, and following people, especially guys, like road rage, like real road rage that was so unsafe and would do with me in the car. And he got more comfortable interrupting me, and saying how I should think and what I should wear, and interrupting my time, like writing or meditating. Like this went into like year 3. And then there were arguments at every holiday, it turns out, and every special occasion would get ruined. There would always be crying. It would be me. Every time that he had some massive outbreak or violent outbreak, yelling, he would like blame his childhood and then get sad and blame his parents and things that happened to him. Anything but taking accountability, essentially. But then I would end up taking care of him and comforting him, even though his outlash was against me and completely inappropriate. So my parents were noticing that I was actually getting more angry. I wasn't being myself. And when I went home, they like talked to me a few times. Like they were concerned, but I was like Miss Hardcore Independent and moved away from the Midwest, right? So I would just say like, I'm great. Everything's fine. Relationships are supposed to be hard, which is what I heard from so many different people. Coffee was starting to do nothing for me. I was tired all the time. I was making coffee last from like 8 a.m. to like 2 p.m. in the afternoon as like a comfort drink. And he like quit another job. I never got the details. Like just basically he knows better than them and didn't want to work there anymore. There was pressure to travel, even though for a while I was the breadwinner most of the time. So it was like pressuring me to spend more of my money. And then it was pressure to buy new things for travel that we had to do and that I would buy for him because I had store cards. He was like, well, you have a store card. Why don't you just buy it for me? And then opened up a line of credit before I even knew what that was because it was for, quote, us. Oh. So in year 3, there's more yelling, there's more slamming of things, there's more meanness, there's more sexual coercion, meaning I didn't necessarily like want to or yearn to have sex with my partner, but I would be kind of coerced into it. There were holes being punched in walls. Doors were being ripped off their hinges. And I was fixing those holes in the walls, not him. And I became really good friends with someone he was related to. And she ended up dying from cancer. And then we trauma bonded over that. Like there was probably already a trauma bond, but then it bonded us more and probably made me feel like I couldn't leave either. And I think I talked myself into thinking it was also like mourning and not just like depression and sadness of this relationship. So I was getting into the freeze part of like fight, flight, freeze, fawn, right? And I was getting into dissociative coping mechanisms. I was smoking too much. I was drinking too much. I was staying on the couch for days at a time when I wasn't working. And everything was just like hard to do. Like it was just harder to do. Later I found out I was in like like a 2 to 3 year depressive episode. But I remember one day I felt like good enough and to go out. So I like put on a skirt. I actually like felt good enough to put on makeup and perk up a little bit. And I was going to take myself literally like 2 minutes away down the road to a cafe to drink coffee and journal. And I remember when I came out feeling good, he was like, "Where are you going? Where are you going dressed like that?" Okay. And just like scoffed and like popped my bubble, essentially. I remember that making me so sad. So I kind of became a shell of myself. My eyes were dark. There was no glow. There was no sparkle. I didn't have any light in myself or my eyes. I wasn't cheerful. I was really good at hiding it though, because I was still like running and going to yoga classes and doing different things. I would still see friends, but I would be like busy. And honestly, I was having like a near soul death experience from all of this. My instincts were injured and bruised, and it was a sad time. So year 4 was a lot of the same thing. And then mid to end of year 5, I had this inkling to do like a spiritual reading with my now dear friend Jax. But she helped me at that time to understand where I was at and how far off my destined path like I had gotten. That year, right? He has a new job, but he refuses to fix his car. He makes me rent cars for him or like put them in my name with my information and my money. There's more throwing things, there's more breaking things. And something that I noticed that is a little sad now, but like he used to like throw and break either a plate or a coffee mug or something. Those things used to be around the room. And then this year they started getting closer and like closer to my body, like 90 degrees perpendicular to me, and then like 45 degrees closer, and then like right by my head. And I was like, this, I like looking back, I realized that was so dangerous and unhealthy and violence in the home. And I guess you could call it domestic violence. So many times throughout this, I would see like my own eyes and like feel in my heart, like, that's not you. Where are you? Where are you at, honey? Sweetie. What's going on? You know, I wanted the light back in my eyes. And at a certain point, my whole being and body and mind and heart and soul just said, no, you're going to leave. You're going to get out right now. And before I left, more money was like manipulated out of me. And I moved out and rented this really small room right before my 29th birthday. Like it was like the week before March I got out, and my birthday is March 8th. I was, even after leaving, I was like manipulated out of the love for my dog. So a whole host of other shit happened as I unpacked it the next like couple years after that, as well as continued to be emotionally manipulated by that person. But I'm going to stop here because that's the kind of arc that happened, right? And then came the initiation of the underground forest, which I go into in my Witches Road episode. So I'm able to share this now because I am in a good mental and emotional space. And I know that people, especially women, some women have experiences and can absolutely relate to it. And some people are just becoming aware of the predator, either within themselves or in the outside world. Or some people have been harassed by it for decades and are at last ready to like get that shit the fuck out of their life or the fuck out of their mind. So here are the 5 major lessons that we're going to get into and break down. That ignoring intuition injures instincts. That predators thrive on isolation. Curiosity and courage lead to freedom. Community is vital. And how to rebuild instincts after injury. So, lesson 1. Ignoring intuition injures our instincts. The natural predator of the psyche. So Bluebeard represents the archetypal predator who preys on silenced intuition, right? But Bluebeard itself represents the innate predator in all women's psyches, like in all of our psyches. And if we're to restrain the predator, we must remain in possession of our instinctual powers like insight, intuition, endurance, keen sensing, things like that, right? So it's essentially like a complex, a reclusive complex within all of us, just waiting to oppose us, waiting to oppose our big ideas, our inspiration. Ooh, I want to do that. And they're like, you can't do that. You're going to look ridiculous. Like all that shit talking in our psyche, okay? But the problem posed in the tale is that, like, rather than empowering the young feminine forces of the psyche, he instead is filled with hatred and desires to kill the lights of the psyche. So to understand the predator is to become a mature animal. What does that mean? Someone who is not vulnerable of naivete, inexperience, or foolishness. The next point we talk about is naive women as prey. The youngest sister represents creative potential within, but there's a detour, right? She agrees to be the prize of this like vicious man. Initially, she's wary, but there's like a little bit of pleasure, and then that outweighs her intuition. And we've all been there, right? The like, oh, he wore me down, or she just wore me down, and now we're together, and like it's not amazing, but here we are, blah blah blah, years later. Which time or length of relationship is not an indicator of its health. I learned that the hard way. Whenever someone says like they've been together for X amount of years, I'm like, are you happy? Just to check in with them, you know? So our wildish nature knows, but the naive psyche is what blocks her knowing in the story, in the tale. And most of us, usually as teens, especially if we're like feisty, kind of insist on being involved with the predator at least once before being shocked awake. It happened to me a few times, actually. I remember when I was 14, this 18-year-old like thought I was cute, wanted to date. And my parents were like, this is unacceptable. And I was like, I'll do what I want. It was not good. It was not healthy. And Dr. Estes talks about how we're taught even before the age of 5 to make pretty all the grotesque things around us. And it's that training that makes the youngest sister think that Bluebeard isn't really that bad. And this training to be nice causes women to override their intuitions. Yeah, hard agree. I'll come back to that. So the older sister's voices represent the truths that are whispered in the back of our minds, right? The youngest sister, the wife, she's told she can do whatever she wants, but with a condition. So she's actually living less rather than living more. And in my life, right, like we're taught about stranger danger. We're taught like if you're a girl that boys older than you only want one thing, which is kind of only like a little peek into that some people older than you are predators, but it's like a sliver. It's like a crack of the door compared to like life slamming the door wide fucking open when we are sincerely fooled for the first time. That's what it feels like. The thing that I learned that's a little sad is that someone doesn't just come for your body, they come for your light too. And mine was almost snuffed out. And I kind of think that my instincts were actually already injured when I met that person. And I didn't zoom in all the way and I didn't zoom out all the way. Like I didn't look at the bigger picture. I didn't ask a lot of questions. And the one I did ask, they were kind of grazed over. And then I accepted them, right? Like he made things about me. He didn't talk about himself. I never saw his home or his apartment where he lived before we moved in together. Huge flag. I was like, I forget what he said, like something like either it was a mess or he was about to move anyway, so everything was packed, and that just feels like a full-on lie. We would take my car because his was in the shop, right? But I later found out, like, you know, a couple of his tires were out of air, and he left it that way for months, I think, and just like refused to get it fixed, not even necessarily needing new tires. Like, you don't even need to do that. You need to like get them patched. And I was living less instead of living more, even though we were doing these cool things around LA or like going to new places. Like the way that he drove and going to a new place, like that means I would suffer on the way there. I would suffer on the way back. I would feel his anger emanating, like it directly impacted me. And I remember even telling him, like, that impacts me. He's like, how does it impact me? It's me. It's not you. It's not to you. I'm like, I have to feel it though. Like, no emotional intelligence. He had no emotional intelligence, which I found out was kind of like a pattern for some of my relationships as well. He only had one way of thinking and feigned growth. Like he would insist on his own thinking, but would start interrupting and correcting me if I had a different type of thought. I was making pretty his true ugliness, and I should have just let it be ugly and say that's not my problem to fucking fix. Bye. Another point Dr. Estes points out, the importance of snuffling. Snuffling, aka, is curiosity, okay? So the heroine's curiosity uncovered the truth, even though it came at a cost, right? But ignoring that instinct can lead to danger. So the key represents the deepest secrets of the psyche. He prompts her with a false sense of freedom. And Dr. Estes has this quote that's awesome. I want to share it. It says, women who are gullible or those with injured instincts still, like flowers, turn in the direction of whatever sun is offered. We have a natural instinct for curiosity. And if she attempts to obey these orders in the story, she chooses death of her spirit. But if she opens a door like she does, she chooses life. The door is a representation of a psychic barrier, okay? And we strengthen that psychic barrier, the door, when we discourage ourselves from diving too deeply. But questions are the keys that cause the doors of our psyche to swing open. So we should ask them. We should figure out what's behind the visible. We should see what's making that shadow over there. You know what I mean? Dr. Estes is a fucking poet. She says, those who want to develop consciousness pursue all that stands behind the readily observable. She's a fucking poet. She's a G. I know that I ignored and suppressed my gut instincts early in that relationship. Predators in real life exploit your vulnerabilities and your doubts. And that's exactly what happened. There were so many red flags too. There was love bombing. I would see anger and notice him suppress it, even though he would turn red. These grand gestures that definitely fizzled out. Withholding personal information, wanting to move in so soon, wanting to see and talk to me every single day and only about me and not about him. I trusted people until they gave me a reason not to. And I still do. But I trusted this mask, this version of that person. And even when he gave me a lot of reasons not to trust it anymore, I was trying to make pretty the grotesque, right? I was trained that relationships are hard and sometimes men get angry and it's normal. Testosterone, blah, 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 right? I thought that I'll keep going and I'll love even harder to get back to this amazing person that I dated at the beginning of the relationship who never really fucking existed. Fuck. Cheers to who I am now. 1 second. Go, bad bitch, go, bad bitch, go. All right, we're getting into lesson 2. Predators thrive on isolation. Dr. Estes points out the animal groom. Predators, they often mask their true nature, presenting themselves as ideal partners to gain trust and control. So the key in the story is a symbol of her life, right? And it won't stop bleeding. It won't stop giving the cry that something is wrong. The bleeding is a representation. It's a loss of energy. And it won't stop until the predator is acknowledged. And what she wants you to think of is our most crucial dreams and aspirations and goals and desires that are lifeless now because they've been drained of blood. They've been drained of energy. And the animal groom to me is that mask that I believed in, right? But all these different characters in this tale, they're all representations of our psyche, okay? It's not like the guy who did it to the girl and then the actual brothers came to save her because she's helpless. No, these are all representations of the psyche, of the feminine psyche. The brothers represent part of the psyche. They're not just dudes. They can be any gender. I want to point that out, okay? And here's an example of what the predator of the psyche can look like, okay? So it's how procrastination can become self-hatred or shame, the new beginnings that don't happen, and the endings that should have been done are never actually met. The predator in the psyche or in real life derails your goals. My key or my cries that something was super wrong were so loud. I was angrier and proud of it. I didn't have a support system in California yet. So I was, again, isolation, right? I was angry at my family for not trying harder to contact me more because I was doing the majority of it at the time. I was tired all the time. My acne was horrible. I started waking up crying. So having horrible dreams and waking up like that. I started to spend all my time working out, but it was really me disassociating. And it was the only place that I could get dopamine at the time. So even though physically I was becoming stronger, it was an unhealthy habit at the time for me. So another part of this lesson is called blood scent. Predators smell vulnerability. They use it to isolate and manipulate. There's blood loss, right, of our most soulful aspects of our creative lives. It's losing energy to create. So in the story, she seems flattened out. Blood isn't menstrual, it's arterial from the soul. So the representation of clothing in the story, right? Archetypally, they personify the outer presence, the persona, or the mask the person is showing the world. And then there's the crying question. The blood stains all of her clothing, so she can't hide her pain anymore. Now, in the Lucinian mysteries, aka ancient Greek, the key was hidden on the tongue or the clues. It was key words. It was key questions, the questions to ask. What stands behind? What is not as it appears? What do I know deep in my ovaries, that I wish I did not know? What of me has been killed off or lays dying? And Dr. Estes says, again, as a poet, and if a woman has been leading a half-dead life, the answers to the questions will have blood on them. But the soul force, our soul force, can come back to life. The young wife and sisters in the story, they break the old patterns of ignorance by being able to behold the horror and not look away from it. So in my life, about this lesson of isolation and the predator, that person that I was dating was angry all the time. Obviously, he had zero emotional intelligence and had no idea how to regulate himself. I was completely alone throughout a lot of this relationship. Like, he would find things he didn't like about the few friends that I did have. He would discourage me from seeing them or turn me against them. He would hang on to little things I got annoyed with and with family, and would just like stoke that fire. I was definitely isolated, and he made himself like my everything, my one-stop shop for everything, which is not healthy. And even when I wanted time for myself just to meditate in the other room or journal in the other room, he would break those tiny boundaries under the guise of like missing me from the other room or the other part of the apartment. Like, I was suffocating and smiling at the pillow. God. Let's get into lesson 3. Curiosity and courage can lead to freedom. Dr. Esses points out backtracking and looping, and also giving the cry. The wife knows, the psyche knows, and tries to avoid being killed, right? And begs for time. In reality, it's strengthening itself for battle. Real life women plan their escapes too. The wife pleads for time. Bluebeard thinks it's because she's about to like submit, but she's moving her energy to strength. She's a shrewd, bad bitch. She's getting ready. And when a woman understands she's been prey, she's done. The woman is incredibly tired. Okay, we must not go to sleep. Remember this. In order to survive in a sub-zero temperature night, this dark night of the soul, if you will, we cannot give in to fatigue. Backtracking and looping is, she's mentioning this because wolves do it. So she's like diving underground. The wife in the story, the youngest sister in the story, is diving underground to get away and resurfaces behind him, behind Bluebeard. Now, giving the cry, calling for help, can be a pivotal moment of agency. The young woman, the youngest sister, summons her psychic brothers, aka the muscled, naturally aggressive proponents of the psyche. They represent the force within women that when it's time to act or kill off malignant impulses, they can do it. It can be either gender in a story, and this one is brothers, but remember, it's part of the psyche of the person, whatever gender they are. She calls to her sisters, and her sisters, the wiser ones, become center stage. They become her eyes. And the sisters cry, scream, right over long distance, where her brothers, the part of the psyche that's trained to fight, are. Now, this psychic figure is called the animus, okay? It's an internal masculine energy, basically. It's invested in qualities traditionally bred out of women, kind of like aggression being one of them. But the animus is about like the doing, the bringing to life, the aid in accomplishing things, okay? So, for example, a woman with a poorly developed animus has lots of ideas, but isn't able to manifest them in the outer world. So her brothers represent strength and action of our psyche. I love the brothers in my psyche. It just took me until that 5-year mark for them to be activated. I saw truth in actions, right? Like, how many years can one person say, I'm sorry, and then not follow that up with action to change? That is called manipulation, turns out. And when I decided to leave, like really made the decision to leave, I became cunning and wise. I started to plan my escape. I actually hid money for months. The job that I had at the time, we would get tips, and I would bring just like a few bucks home that he knew about at the time, when in reality, I would put the majority of them every single day into this one envelope and add it up and add it up. And I waited until I had enough money to at least rent a room, like a small room from someone. I waited until I had that much to do the breakup or have that conversation, because I was kind of prepared to take off if I had to for my safety. That relationship was really hard because I had to mentally prepare to go to my own home. I had to prepare to get out of bed to be around this person. I walked on eggshells for years, trying not to trigger like their anger or their violence in the home. And even though I was on my tippy toes, like my feet were sliced into fucking pieces somehow. It was really hard. I personally, I wanted the light back in my eyes. I wanted my sparkle. I wanted my joy. And I loved my joy. I have always been happy. I've always been above average positive. I missed it. I yearned for it. And I was kind of angry too. Like I chose poorly. I had been fooled. I had been tricked. I had been conned. And I was pissed off about it. And at the same time, I was sad. Um, because even though this person was toxic and abusive, they were my person for years. I was isolated with them and I was alone with them. And I would be more alone, I thought, when I left. I was fatigued for years at this point, and it would have been really easy to slip back into that like psychic sleep. But again, everything in me said, no, 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 no. Like, this is not my path. I do not accept. I refuse. Let's get into lesson 4. Community and support are vital. So women are usually able to vanquish the predator by taking what is useful from it and leaving the rest. So like rage can be our soul fire to accomplish a task, or the predator's craftiness can be used to inspect things from afar, like zoom out and look at someone, right? So the story is meant to set inner life back in motion. It set my life back in motion, not the story, but like getting out of it. It was not fast. I promise it's not immediate rainbows when you leave either. It wasn't for me, at least. So I'm sorry to break that to whoever needs to hear that. But a lot of it was realizing what took place was actually called abuse, because I didn't call it abuse at the time. Now, I debated on whether or not I should share this next part that Dr. Estes talks about, but I do think it's actually relevant. The part is called The Dark Man in Women's Dreams. It's the archetype of the predator and lingering in dreams or memories and reminding us to remain vigilant. And there's a pattern in this dream, and I'm going to read you what she shares about it. The dreamer is alone, often in her own home. There are one or more prowler types outside in the dark. Frightened, she dials the emergency phone number for help. Suddenly, she realizes the prowler is inside the house with her, close to her. Perhaps she can feel his breath. Perhaps he is even touching her. And she cannot ring the emergency number. The dreamer awakens instantly, breathing gutturally, heart like a crazy drum. So those types of dreams are an indicator that a woman's consciousness is beginning to gain awareness of the innate psychic predator. I wanted to talk about this because I know I'm not alone in having these types of dreams, because I did have them and still do sometimes on occasion. In other circumstances, the dream is about like an increasingly intolerable situation, or one she's being called to either fight or flee. And the dark man in the dream appears when initiation, or like a psychic change from one level of knowing to another, is imminent. And this is important for women who have Bluebeardian type of like dark man dreams. It is important for that person to cleanse her life of as much negativity as possible. There were years where I actually would wake up crying from dreams. It happened some before the relationship. It happened absolutely during the relationship. It happened for a few years after the relationship. And in the dream or dreams, I often was fighting someone, defending someone in fighting, or being violated in fighting. I would wake up exhausted. I would wake up fatigued. And my dreams started changing in the last year, actually, which is like year 4 after that cost. But it's not just because of that relationship, I want to point out. It's because I started drawing more boundaries for myself. Like I started giving way to more curiosities of my spirit. I started meditating more consistently, doing real self-care, like not just like disassociating coping mechanisms, right? But the immediate months after the breakup, I did help my own soul. Like I surrounded myself with 3 girlfriends and we would meet up at the beach every single week. And that helped my spirit, because it was a recovery of my coven and nature, right? I was connecting with earth and my spirit. You know the part in Agatha all along when the maestra is asking Lilia, like, have you a coven? She's like, no. Are you rooted in nature? She's like, no. And those things are really important in real life. They are very, very important. They were really key to my healing anyway. And now I surround myself with friends and mentors that don't take shit from anyone. Like they're psychically strong. They help me be strong, continuing to be me and the woman I'm meant to become. I let friends lose me because some were either judgmental or condescending, or didn't believe in me. My circle got really, really small, like really small. After that relationship, I started slowly like opening up to trusted people and got perspective. I started reconnecting with my needs and my desires. Like, it took time. Don't get me wrong. And that leads me into lesson 5, rebuilding instincts after injury. The last point of Dr. Estes I'm going to share, reconnecting with wild woman. We all know healing involves reawakening the intuitive, the instinctual self, and reestablishing trust in one's own knowing. And she writes about the cure for both the naive woman and the instinct injured woman are the same. And it is these 6 beautiful things. Practice listening to your intuition and your inner voice. Ask questions. Be curious. See what you see. Hear what you hear. Then act upon what you know to be true. I did all these things sprinkled throughout years of time. I started speaking up for myself and saying no when I meant no, even if my hands were shaking. I would call out disgusting behavior of men, of course, as long as it was a safe situation, like I felt safe to do so. I knew what led to that relationship and how it got dangerous by starting with pushing against small boundaries. So, like, I create clear ones of my own, and I started side-eyeing people who would push against even the smallest, like disregarding even the smallest boundaries. I like my own company. I started liking my own company. I started reconnecting with my body, with my gut. I would lead into it if something's just seemed off about someone or something. And I was honest with myself. And for me, that looked like coming out as bisexual at 29, dating women, feeling alive. My workouts were for my mental health, and they weren't an escape of my reality anymore. I would give way to my curiosities. Like, I paid for Babbel. I'm practicing my Spanish. I'm learning the cello. I bought a cello. I'm doing things that just like make me and my soul smile. So there's a reason that the tale of Bluebeard has been passed on and on, because it's not just a story. Like, it's a guide map. It's a guide map for recognizing predators, both external and internal. It teaches us that we can actually reclaim our fucking power by being curious and listening to intuition and having a coven, having a support system. And honestly, I'm sure that everyone has had their own Bluebeard moments, whether it's like in your relationship or work relationships, power dynamics, personal, allowing yourself to actually do what you want to do and follow your curiosities and being brave enough to make big goals. And I wanted to say that you're not alone if you ever felt isolated, or if you ignored your gut instincts, or you let a mask fool you, or you doubted your self-worth. I did that shit too. And I have a lot of women that send me messages, some I know personally, some I don't know at all, that have shared their stories with me and acknowledged that they have the same type of story. So you're not alone if you're one of them. And for the people who are going through it, if you need a little bit of light, like, I like myself now. I feel empowered of who I am and of who I am becoming, the woman I'm becoming. My energy is pretty strong and my boundaries are strong, and no one really fucks with me. And for the people that don't appreciate my light, my warmth, or take it for granted, then I let them lose me. I have started to and continue to reconnect with my intuition, my inner knowing. She's always fucking right. Kind of love it now. And I lean on my people. And it feels really good to lean on your people. I am a fucking wild woman getting back to my untamed self. And I promise you can do that shit too. I love you with all my heart. Why don't we end this with a deep breath together? Okay. Inhale in. Exhale. I'm going to do one more just because I felt so good. Okay. Inhale. Exhale. Thank you so much for being here with me on this.